Thanks for joining us. The battle over bike lanes once again in the spotlight this weekend. Protesters coming together at Queen's Park. It comes as the Ontario government introduced last-minute amendments to its already controversial bike lane removal bill. Tyler Cheese takes us there.
Stop with the politicking. This is actual people's lives.
These cyclists are pushing back against the province's plans to remove certain bike lanes to help address traffic congestion.
We are here today to protest the government's proposed Bill 212, which plans to remove sections or all of the bike lanes along Bloor-Yonge and University.
The bike lane removal is part of a proposed bill that would require municipalities to get provincial permission for any bike lane that would remove a lane of vehicle traffic. A few days ago, news also broke that amendments to the bill would protect the province from being sued by cyclists injured on roadways where bike lanes would be removed.
The amendments to the bill are pretty much the government preemptively trying to make themselves not liable for stuff that they know otherwise they could very well be sued for, and that is going to be cyclists that are injured and who die on the streets of Toronto and other municipalities in Ontario.
Speaking with media this week, the Transport Minister and the Premier defended the province's position.
We believe that people should be on secondary streets, where it's much safer for everyone to be traveling if they're using a bicycle.
Go on the secondary roads that run parallel, a few feet away from the existing roads. Be careful out there, and we're going to get stuff going, moving, and that's what we're doing. Simple as that.
But cyclists say taking secondary streets isn't that simple.
Toronto is not a perfect grid, and most of the time there aren't streets that run alongside the primary streets for very long. If you look at Yonge between Bloor and St. Clair, there's just absolutely nothing similar on side streets that you could take instead of Yonge.
The bill is also seeing pushback at City Hall.
And as more and more people cycle, you look at the numbers of bike share. We want to keep the roads safe for them and to the driver. Driver will tell you that not having bikes weaving in and out of them, in front of them, makes driving a lot easier because the cyclist over there, the driver is over here. So let's continue to look at the data. We'll continue to talk to the provincial government. Let's hope we find a middle ground.
We'll see how it all shakes out soon. The bill's third reading is expected at Queen's Park on Monday. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
The mayor of Mississauga is stepping down from the Peel Police Service Board. Carolyn Parrish announcing her resignation in a letter on Friday. She says staying on would require her supporting a budget increase for Peel Police to the tune of 21.3%. She says the increase comes as Mississauga faces constrained financial circumstances. In her letter, Parrish goes on to say, quote, "We are in very difficult times with housing costs escalating, an unprecedented food insecurity crisis that sees 1 in 13 of our residents forced to use food banks." It goes on to say seniors struggling to stay in their homes as property taxes rise and encampments for those who can't find space in our shelters. The Chief of Police presented the 2025 budget during Friday's Peel Police Service Board meeting. CBC reached out to Peel Police and Mayor Parrish for further comment, but did not hear back before broadcast. It is now day 9 of the Canada Post strike. At issue are wages, working conditions, and worker responsibilities. In a statement, Canada Post said today it is down more than 8 million parcels compared to the same period of 2023 as customers have been forced to turn to competitors for their deliveries, adding it's offered competitive wage increases, 11.5% over 4 years, and additional paid leave while protecting the defined benefit pension and job security provisions. Canada Post says it's lost more than $3 billion since 2018. As Dale Manuktuk shows us, while the strike drags on, businesses, charities, and families are all feeling the impact.
Unionized workers have the right to go on strike.
Postal workers and other union members staged a solidarity rally in Toronto with some support from passers-by. They are just a small portion of the tens of thousands on strike since November 15th.
Our members are out 2% of their annual wages for the year. No matter what wage increase we get, we'll never make up for that. We're not only standing for wage increases, we're standing for dignity, to retire with dignity.
Postal workers aren't the only ones losing out. Small businesses are too, according to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business.
They are concerned about losing out on sales. They're also concerned about not getting some of the materials they need to offer their services or their products. So ultimately, this is something that's going to affect their costs.
The CFIB sent a letter to the Minister of Labour urging Ottawa to intervene and move the sides towards binding arbitration.
Be even half joking, when the CFIB writes a letter and sends a letter, how does that get delivered given the strike?
Well, it gets delivered by email. So yes, fair point.
Email? That's no fun, but at least it gets the job done. Meanwhile, Christmas is in the air, but the magic of writing Santa a letter and getting a reply has vanished along with the strike.
I've been wanting a lot for Christmas, so I've been writing a lot, so that's why I'm really excited to send it to Santa. I'm planning to make a big list.
Canada Post says due to the strike, mail to and from the big fella in the North Pole isn't happening. Last year, Canada Post says it helped Santa deliver responses to 1.4 million letters from around the world. But for now, parents are on their own.
We actually have a special delivery system through a little elf that visits our house. So we're just hoping that through this really one-on-one intimate relationship that our elf Snowflake has with Santa, that the letter will get to him.
Canada Post hopes the sleigh to Santa will resume as soon as possible. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
We are taking you live to Rogers Centre in downtown Toronto, the final night for Swifties to see their favorite superstar on the big stage. This is night 6 of Taylor Swift's Eras Tour. It has brought such a flurry of excitement, sequence, and big spending for the local economy. Nama Weingarten takes a look at the numbers.
At this point, you might be familiar with the term Swiftonomics. It refers to the massive economic impact Taylor Swift brings everywhere she goes. Before she came to town, Destination Toronto estimated she's going to generate $282 million in economic impact, including more than $152 million in direct spending. Businesses near Rogers Centre say they felt the boom.
It's been insane. The last week that she's been here in Toronto, we've seen sales shoot through the roof. It feels like almost every third customer is buying at least one Taylor Swift record.
And believe it or not, the Swifties are also getting tatted.
So her having her concerts here has kept us really, really busy. The Swifties like simple tattoos, like the cute little Pinterest stuff. These are inspired off of her albums. The day of a concert, we were doing maybe 25 to 30 of them. These are the little friendship bracelets that the Swifties have brought us here.
Beads for Dee's infamous friendship bracelets turned into such a hot commodity, the bead store down the street saw their sales double.
Especially the alphabet beads, 3 or 4 times than before.
Destination Toronto also said there were 83% more hotel bookings for the dates of the concerts compared to last year. We heard from some of the businesses, but here's what the numbers say. The credit and debit processing firm Moneris reported the impact of the first 3 shows. They say overall spending downtown went up by 57% week over week, including a 32% rise for clothing stores and a 78% rise for accessories. While they say restaurant spending was only up 2%, snack shops saw a 61% increase. And in case you're mad about Americans buying many of the tickets, they say international spend more than doubled. And some of the fans told us just how they're spending their money.
Yeah. We went to 100 Sunning last night, and it was all Taylor Swift, and it was so fun. I came from Nashville, Tennessee, and I just bought some souvenirs.
This is my second coffee of the day, so I feel like we're into the cafes.
Destination Toronto tell us they don't expect to release a final tally of Taylor Swift's impact until the end of the year. Meanwhile, businesses are hopeful the boost continues, and Taylor's descent on the city might have inspired some new people to fall in love with it and come back. Nama Weingarten with 2 new friendship bracelets I got just while standing here. CBC News, Toronto.
Oh, now I have envy. I want to be down there getting the bracelets, Sophia. That's what we got to do. We should be taking the show on the road.
I'll swap some bracelets with you after. I love it. Yeah, the vibes have been amazing. It'll be hard, though, in the long range to shake off the cold weather incoming. We'll have more on that in the long range pattern. Not bad for the Swifties out there right now, feeling 5 or around the downtown core of the 6. Look at Sunday, though. The tail end wraparound bands of lake effect flurries and showers from the tail end of this upper level trough we've had with us this weekend. It is not going to be snow for those of you in the snow belt that is sticking to the ground. The ground is far too warm, but what it could mean Sunday on any of the major highways is some pockets of reduced visibility, especially this 400 south around Barrie through Keswick on the 404 and Port Perry around the Highway 12 stretch. After that, we'll talk more in the long range about the seasonal values Sunday that lead into a messy and potentially snowy system come Monday. But until then, some pretty good temperatures for the big arrival of the big guy in red Sunday around Toronto. Shannon?
Okay, we'll talk about that a little later on in the show. Thanks, Sophia. Canadian University football crowning its latest champions, the Vanier Cup taking place in Kingston. The unbeaten Laurier Golden Hawks taking on Laval, battling it out for the national title at Richardson Stadium. This field goal in the final few minutes of the game sealed the deal for Laval, giving them a 22-17 victory. Laval wins the crown for a record 12th time. We are heading into a short break now. Stay with us. We're back with you in 3 minutes. We have breaking news this hour from the COP29 Climate Summit. After talks stretch past their deadline, members have just reached an agreement on funding for developing nations. Some of those countries had temporarily walked out, rejecting a proposal yesterday of $250 billion per year. Richer nations have reportedly increased that to $300 billion. It's all aimed at helping developing nations cope with climate change impacts, allowing them to make deeper cuts to greenhouse gas emissions. This all comes amid concerns a new Trump administration will withdraw U.S. support. Lebanon's health ministry says an Israeli airstrike in central Beirut has killed at least 15 people and wounded dozens more. Officials say the strike destroyed an apartment building. Julia Chapman is tracking developments.
Although not unprecedented, strikes on central Beirut were fairly unusual until a few days ago. But Saturday's was the 4th this week. Local media and health officials say several bombs were dropped in the Basta neighborhood, flattening one residential building and leaving another with a gaping hole. Namir Zakaria survived the strike. He described how it unfolded in the early hours of the morning.
We were deep asleep, and then the strike happened, and then a second strike, and we didn't understand what happened. There was dust and wrecked houses, people running and screaming. They were running. My wife is in hospital, my daughter is in hospital, my aunt is in the hospital. This is the little one, and my son also got hurt. This is my daughter. She is in the American University of Beirut Medical Center. This is what happened.
Israel hasn't commented on this strike or explained the widening of its targets in the Lebanese capital. There are reports that a Hezbollah commander was the target of Saturday's strike, but it doesn't appear that he was killed. Israeli forces have also continued to hit Beirut's southern suburbs, once a stronghold of the militant group. This morning it issued a warning before fighter jets took aim at what Israel says were weapons stores and other sites belonging to Hezbollah. Israel's military is aiming to neutralize the threat from the group, which has been launching missiles at Israel for over a year now, in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. Israeli troops are also carrying out a ground offensive in Lebanon's south. Despite continued fighting, there is some tentative optimism that a ceasefire can be reached in Lebanon. American negotiator Amos Hochstein was in Beirut and Tel Aviv this week and said progress had been made. The New York Times reports today that a deal is starting to take shape, which would involve Israeli troops withdrawing from Lebanon and Hezbollah fighters moving north of the Litani River. The Lebanese army and UN peacekeepers would then oversee the buffer zone, but there are concerns about how this would be implemented. It comes amid a rising death toll and growing humanitarian crisis, with more than 3,000 people killed and a fifth of Lebanon's population displaced since fighting escalated in October. Julia Chapman, CBC News, London.
Police in Quebec have arrested 3 people at a pro-Palestinian and anti-NATO protest in Montreal. NATO is holding its 70th anniversary parliamentary assembly in the city. As Heather Gillis shows us, the demonstration was winding its way through downtown Friday evening when things turned violent.
Unrest Friday night as protesters took to Montreal streets. 2 vehicle fires, an effigy, a flame, smoke bombs. Protesters calling for an end to war in Gaza.
Down with NATO!
Denouncing NATO as the Defense Alliance hosts its 70th annual parliamentary assembly this weekend in Montreal, discussing support for Ukraine, climate change, and the alliance's future. 3 demonstrators were arrested for obstructing and assaulting officers, say police. Canada's foreign affairs and defense ministers condemning the violence, calling it unacceptable.
What we saw was not peaceful protests. What we saw was actually violence, hate, and anti-Semitism, and this has no place on our streets. Of course, we believe in the freedom of speech. We believe in the freedom to demonstrate. But where we draw the line is when there's violence.
This was nothing like lawful, peaceful protest. This was anarchy. It was an engagement in violence and hatred on display in the city of Montreal. And in particular, I wanted to particularly condemn the anti-Semitic behaviors.
Quebec Premier François Legault and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau echoing the same sentiment, also saying violence and anti-Semitism is unacceptable, calling for accountability. The head of the Canadian Defence and Security Network says people's pent-up anger about the Israel-Hamas war is driving the protest.
It's mostly an opportunity for them to register their protests with elites within the Western world.
Protests continued in Montreal Saturday afternoon, with Seidman saying police should have anticipated the clashes, and he expects to see a larger law enforcement presence as the meeting continues until Monday. Heather Gillis, CBC News, Toronto.
A graduate from McMaster's biomedical program recently sharing the stage with some pretty big names, including Shaq. She's the winner of a prestigious humanitarian award. She invented a device to help people with limited use of their hands. When she got the news about the honor, she says she almost didn't believe it.
My mom and I were actually together, and my team sent over the email, and we both opened it and thought, this is not real. I got on a Zoom call, I met the Muhammad Ali Center team, and yeah, they told me that the Ali family chose me because Mr. Ali had Parkinson's and lost his ability to do art. So I created the first prototype of guided hands for my friend with cerebral palsy. She loved to paint, but as her condition progressed, she wasn't able to hold onto a paintbrush anymore. So the first prototype was made out of pipe cleaner, straws, and a sponge, included her throughout the entire design process until I created her something that enabled her to paint again. The device is shoulder driven, so the individual's using the gross motor skills in their shoulder to move the device around instead of the fine motor skills in their hand. And the handpiece is then connected to an arm that holds the utensil for the individual. So it can hold a marker, a paintbrush, a stylus. I get goosebumps every time I see a child or adult use guided hands. Their parents and loved ones have tears in their eyes, and they finally have a piece of artwork, a painting to finally put on the fridge at home or wall. You need to engineer with compassion. And I involved the disability community through every single guided hands iteration to make sure that it was accessible and that their needs were heard. When my team and I found out that Shaquille O'Neal was going to be at the Muhammad Ali Humanitarian Awards, we instantly created a Shaq-size version of guided hands, and he was so kind, such a good sport, and even signed the handpiece for me, which was amazing. We etched a basketball on the handpiece and then his number 32. So honestly, it was like a fever dream. It was wonderful to use this award as a platform to create awareness about disability innovation and accessibility to hundreds of people, and even an NBA Hall of Famer.
Congrats to her, so well deserved. Well, after a long journey from the North Pole, Santa Claus is making appearances in several Ontario communities this weekend, from Wasaga Beach, Gravenhurst, Timmins, and Sault Ste. Marie to Toronto Sunday for the biggest parade of the holiday. The 120th annual Santa Claus Parade will start marching at 12:30 Sunday afternoon from Christie Pitts, heading to St. Lawrence Market. In case you missed this weekend's events, don't worry, more Santa parades will happen across the province in the coming weeks, including in Burlington, Grimsby, and Port Hope. You're looking live at Mississauga this hour. It's Light Up the Square tonight. The idea to transform winter nights into a Technicolor wonderland. The star attraction is, of course, the 35-foot Christmas tree, with the big moment happening a little later on, the lights switching on at about 7 o'clock this evening. Sophia's back. I love this time of year. So many festive, fun things happening to get you outside and just being with friends and family.
Yeah, great vibes, and the weather is really cooperating as well. You want that light dusting of picturesque white snow, but we'll take the seasonal values before the chill that sets in later on in the work week. Great conditions for Santa Claus, you saw there. Some scenes from past years for tomorrow. Dress warm morning and evening, especially if you're setting up and tearing down for the big parade. Seasonal values, though, and maybe even a few little sneak appearances of that sunshine. If you want that sun, though, you got to go further to the north and to the east, Algonquin area. You'll have the sun, but you'll have some chillier values. Again, that lake effect, showers and flurries that we talked about earlier around the Huron and the Georgian shores. Chilly, especially in the cottage country in northern Ontario. Into Sunday overnight, temperatures around -5, -6 in the Bancroft area. Into the overnight period, a little cooler for those of you western edge of Lake Ontario with that raw east wind, breezing about 40 kilometers an hour. Sunday overnight, you are close to the freezing mark, but really you are seasonal values to start off this work week. The cooler air, though, is on our doorstep, along with the system incoming from the south. Now, this system will be the door opener, the floodgates that will open up for the cooler air that will come in later on in the work week. Until then, this system, Tuesday into Wednesday, could bring some light flurries and even some heavy snow to parts of northern Ontario. Too early to tell where that rain snow line will end up in parts of southern Ontario for Tuesday into Wednesday. But until then, prepare for a really cool week into next weekend. Some daytime highs could even be below the freezing mark as this lobe of Siberian air is traversing across the country, Shannon.
Time to pull out the big parkas.
Yeah, you got it. It is time. We had a pretty good run so far.
Okay, thanks, Sophia. We'll see you tomorrow night. That is our show for you this evening. Thanks for watching.